view, put on speaker view. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Appreciate joining here today at this program. It is the 16th annual Holocaust and Genocides program, and we've been doing this for the last 15 years. If you go to the website holocaustandgenocides.com, on the top left, there is a column called the Genesis of this program, why and when we started this program. This program is about restoring harmony in the world in our sacred duty. Uh, Dilip, are you on the screen? You may want to uh, do that's fine, you can be on the screen. It is about restoring harmony in the world, and it is our sacred duty. We invite everyone from different communities to hear us out. The Center for Pluralism is about promoting pluralism in religion, politics, society, and culture. And it is to build a cohesive society where every human in the society can feel secure about who he or she is. And that is very important. And the purpose of this particular event is education, information, and activism. We hope at the end of the program, our participants will learn and acknowledge the failings we as human beings have done, and learn to say never again, and identify the events that would lead to genocides, holocausts, massacres, ethnic cleansing, and make an effort to avoid them in the future. And we have, it is one of the important thing I want to mention about this program is the selfish attitude of some people, maybe lack of knowledge. When we are doing this program, we have chosen these 5 or 7 events to be addressed this time. Every year we address different genocides, different massacres, and different ethnic cleansing items. So over the years, we have covered many in 15 years and hope to cover a lot more in the coming decade. And we hope to have a full day program next year. In that program, we will cover every item. If somebody feels, why is my event, why is our event not covered? I want to say that we have covered it. We have mentioned it. It is all on the website. And this is an inclusive program. Nobody is excluded. Your pain, my pain, and everyone's pain, we have to acknowledge the pain and suffering of every human being. It is not a political program. The program is designed to evoke empathy in each one of us. Sometimes we have the apathy towards the suffering of other people. We have to have that empathy to go forward and learn about others, and we are all in this together. So my friends, I'm starting the program. I will introduce our speakers. The program, we have the first reflections on Holocaust by Kate English, then the forced cremation going on in Sri Lanka against the will of the people, particularly Muslims and Christians, and the Kashmiri Pundits. Pundits is an ethnic community, Hindu community, and their exodus that happened in Kashmir, which is very sad. And that is going to be addressed by Dr. Pundit Sharma. And the Kashmiri siege by the Indian government, where all the rights are being tampered, is done by Dr. Nyla Ali Khan. And the Uyghur in China, they are oppressed and there is a genocide going on, and that will be talked by Rushan Abbas. And the plight of Rohingya community from Burma will be talked about Dr. Wakar Deen. And the keynote speaker and Dr. Greg Stanton will speak about what's going on, the religious freedom violations in India. And the keynote speaker is MaryAnn Thompson, who will address in general all of that. And I would ask the speakers to keep as a summary event about 12 minutes each speaker. And with that, we will also give you a separate recording of your own item in the 12 to 15 minutes after it is recorded. And thank you very much. Now we will begin the program. The first speaker is Kate English. Let me introduce her. Trying to find just one speaker introductions. Kate, I ask all members to mute themselves except the speakers. Now the speaker is Kate English. Kate is the director of the Educator Institute for Human Rights and has a deep academic background on Holocaust studies and breadth of experience leading EIHR's effort to teach about the Holocaust and genocides. And in the war-torn regions, looking to recover and build models for reconciliation. On top of all that, Kate is a gifted, compelling speaker. Kate, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Mike. I appreciate being here today. And while I understand you're asking for a summary of the Holocaust, what I'm going to focus on is its relevance, particularly to U.S. educators in our current climate. The history of the Holocaust is I think, perhaps the best known overall, and to try and encapsulate it in 10 minutes, I think would be kind of a Herculean task.
It is. I appreciate that.
Very good. Thank you. On January 27th of 2020, I was honored to witness the commemoration of the 75th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz-Birkenau on site in Poland. In the years since then, the imperative for responsible, accurate, and compassionate Holocaust education has crystallized in a manner many of us could see on the horizon, even if we didn't want to believe it. The United States Holocaust Memorial Museum here in Washington, D.C., summarizes the Holocaust as the systematic, state-sponsored persecution and murder of 6 million Jews by the Nazi regime and its allies and collaborators. Holocaust is a word of Greek origin, meaning sacrifice by fire. The Nazis who came into power in Germany in January of 1933 believed that Germans were racially superior and that Jews, deemed inferior, were an alien threat to the so-called German racial community. During the era of the Holocaust, German authorities also targeted other groups because of their perceived racial and biological inferiority. Roma or Gypsies, people with disabilities, some of the Slavic peoples such as the Poles, the Russians, and others, Soviet prisoners of war, and Black people. Other groups were persecuted on political, ideological, and behavioral grounds, among them communists, socialists, and Jehovah's Witnesses and homosexuals. I've been a specialist in Holocaust and genocide education since 2007. I've studied Holocaust history and educational practices with leading organizations in the field, including the USHMM, Yad Vashem, the Anne Frank House, the USC Shoah Foundation, ADL's Echoes and Reflections, and others. I left the classroom to become the full-time executive director for the Educators Institute for Human Rights only 18 months ago, after 8 years as a founding volunteer in our collaborative work. At EIHR, we cultivate partnerships among educators globally to create materials and deliver training based on best practices in Holocaust and human rights education. We founded EIHR as an all-volunteer, teacher-led nonprofit organization in 2011, over and above our regular classroom commitments. In that time, we've established initiatives on 5 continents, working with partners at the Kigali Genocide Memorial in Rwanda, the Post-Conflict Research Center and the Srebrenica Memorial Center in Bosnia and Herzegovina, the Documentation Center in Cambodia, and the Fundación La Salle in Argentina. We are a community of educators that brings decades of experience in the classroom and, for many, personal experience as survivors of conflict to our common vision, which is to create a more peaceful future through education. For all of us, from all 5 continents and myriad backgrounds, the events of the past month in the United States couldn't be more grave. When I first started teaching about the Holocaust, one of the essential questions we confronted revolved around relevance. How did the Holocaust history relate to our students in the early 2000s? Did it have meaning in their lives? It was a task for educators across the United States to connect the dots, a favorite phrase at the time. There was plenty on the landscape to knit that narrative, but we did need to work at it for students to see the linkage. Events crept into our awareness as the decade progressed, including the gunman who opened fire at the USHMM in 2009, terrorizing visitors and murdering Stephen Tyrone Johns as he sought to protect those inside. Hate graffiti started showing up more frequently in our communities across the US, and a shooting at the Jewish Community Center complex in Overland, Kansas in 2014 took 3 lives.
And
Still,
also the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C.
yes, still we generally regard these as isolated incidents. Broader society condemned the acts immediately, and in our classrooms, they were part of our current events discussions. Connecting the events as relevant was clearer, though most teachers worked to guard against oversimplified comparisons. Then in 2015, we saw the shooting at a church in Charleston, South Carolina. And in August of 2017, marchers with tiki torches took to the streets in Charlottesville, Virginia, openly and unashamedly chanting, "The Jews will not replace us," and "blood and soil," and other white supremacist, anti-Semitic, anti-Muslim rallying cries. Heather Heyer was killed the next day as James Fields Jr., a member of the hate group Vanguard America, deliberately plowed his car into a peaceful protest. And now Holocaust education became an imperative, an object lesson to address the H.G. Wells quote, "Civilization is a race between education and catastrophe." Those of us with training in established guidelines and best practices in Holocaust education now relied heavily on that training to create safe spaces in our schools, to teach difficult material compassionately with awareness for developmentally appropriate practices. We worked harder than ever to teach the history of the Holocaust and current events without traumatizing students, because they arrived in our classrooms alarmed by the connections that they were witnessing in real time. In October of 2018, an anti-Semitic gunman killed 11 people and injured at least 6 others at the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Many of us, as teachers across the country, attended memorial services at our community synagogue so that our students would know we supported them. And still, we continued to witness rising anti-Semitism, anti-Muslim behavior, white supremacy, and other hateful ideology with each day that went by. At EIHR, we see greater tolerance for hate developing across the globe, increasing the possibility of large-scale conflict. We saw that writ large here in Washington, D.C. 2.5 weeks ago. Dozens of articles from myriad organizations help us to decode the overwhelming number of hate groups and their symbols. But we didn't need any decoding to understand some of the messages during the insurrection at the Capitol. A Confederate flag in the Capitol rotunda, neo-Nazi banners, a noose on the Capitol lawn, sweatshirt promoting Camp Auschwitz. These symbols continue to propagandize the hate of men and women who believe in it. Conspiracy theories and false equivalencies flourish in the dark spaces of indoctrination and denial, just as they have before. The protocols of the Elders of Zion, a long-established anti-Semitic lie, fed German culture in the 1930s. They currently are woven into QAnon conspiracy theories. For Holocaust educators scrambling to create safe spaces for students to process these events, the challenge has been unprecedented. Any discussion of Holocaust and genocide education for US students must include unvarnished study of our own history of atrocities. Beginning with the first recorded genocide on what would become American soil, which would be the slaughter of Pequots in Mystic, Connecticut in May of 1637, and including the forcible enslavement of Africans, atrocities against Native peoples, including the Native American boarding school movement, internment of Japanese citizens during World War II, and other group-targeted violence, America has much to reconcile. For every 2 steps we make toward educational integrity, we seem to take one backwards, as the recent 1776 Commission report illustrates. While the new administration has taken down that report, until we address our past through our own truth and reconciliation process, our efforts to unite and heal are stymied. Contemporary German education offers an example of confronting hard history. While they may have room for improvement, as we all do, the curriculum recognizes the role of the country and its citizens as a whole in carrying out the Holocaust. As described to me by a colleague on a pre-COVID trip to Berlin, younger German generations learn to, quote, take responsibility, but not blame. Researchers Daniel Bowen and Brian Kisida in their 2019 study, Never Again, the Impact of Learning About the Holocaust on Civic Outcomes, find that teaching students about the Holocaust can play a vital role in the development of citizens who will protect civil liberties and defend oppressed populations, which they cite as critical to the development of citizens capable of effectively serving as protectors of freedom and human rights in an increasingly diverse and polarized democratic society. Education is the antidote to indoctrination and denial. We must teach our history based on accurate, evidence-based information. As Nelson Mandela famously stated, education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. Understanding Holocaust and human rights history is the path to change.
Indeed, indeed.
If we are to apply the best practices of Holocaust education as a means to develop a citizenry that protects freedom and human rights, we must learn how to confront our own history. Each of my 18 years with students in the classroom, I read aloud Robert F. Kennedy's speech delivered in Indianapolis on the April night that Dr. Martin Luther King was shot and killed. Mr. Kennedy quoted his favorite poet, Aeschylus. In our sleep, pain which cannot forget falls drop by drop upon the heart until, in our own despair, against our will, comes wisdom through the awful grace of God. He went on to say, what we need in the United States is not division. What we need in the United States is not hatred. What we need in the United States is not violence or lawlessness, but love and wisdom and compassion toward one another, and a feeling of justice toward those who still suffer within our country, whether they be Black or they be white. If indeed civilization is a race between education and catastrophe, we want to win that race. EIHR believes that working as an education community with fact-based training, accurate materials, and full support of teachers and networks of educators globally, we can sow wisdom, compassion, and justice to create a more peaceful future.
Thank you so much. We appreciate you. I just want to share that to all those who have endured Holocaust, genocides, massacres, ethnic cleansing, landmines, hunger, rape, torture, occupation, expulsion, and inhuman brutality, we must say you are not alone in this. We are all in this together. Your pain is my pain. I hope we come to a point where every human being feels everybody else's pain as legitimate and valid as my own pain. And I think we need to work on educating along with you. Thank you so much. I appreciate Kay.
Thank you. I appreciate you as well, Mike.
Thank you. And now we go to the second program we have is cremation, forced cremation in Sri Lanka. And we will have Soraya Deen speak about it. Let me, before I introduce her, let me show you a little video screen. Let me think. Close that. Bear with me, I'm trying to open this screen.
We don't have sound, Mike.
Okay, I don't know what to do. The sound is
Oh,
coming here in my ears.
oh,
So Mike, you will have to click on the option over there.
What option?
When you're sharing it, you have to like there's a small dot at the bottom. When you're
Okay.
sharing it, you will have to share it audio from computer.
How do I do that? I guess.
It is in the top. It is in the bottom left corner. Please cancel this video.
Okay.
And then when you start sharing it, before you start sharing it, there is a small little dot at the bottom left corner which says audio, enable audio sharing from computer at the bottom left corner.
Okay, just 1 second. Stop video. Okay, we'll miss this screen and let Soraya Deen speak. Just give me a second. Let me close this thing. Just 1 second. Give me a technical difficulty. Okay, I'm back again. Sorry about that technical difficulty.
Yes.
Thanks. Let me introduce
Computer
Soraya
sound.
Deen.
It says share computer sound, Mr. Mike.
Is it coming better now? Thank you. Thank you. Let me go back again.
Yes.
Introduce Soraya Deen. She's going to speak about the forced cremation in Sri Lanka. Soraya Deen is an award-winning international activist and community organizer. She's a lawyer and a founder of Muslim Women Speaker Movement. She is the co-founder of Peace Moms, that is promoting Christian-Muslim dialogue, and the Interfaith Solidarity Network, one of the largest interfaith organizations in Los Angeles. Soraya is the author of Peace Matters, Raising Peace-Conscious Children. Soraya, please speak about the program. Sorry we couldn't get the video.
that's fine. Thank you for trying. So it was September 11th, 2007. I had just driven to pick my 7-year-old son from school. And that day, as I parked the car and stepped onto the sidewalk, I heard the school bell ring. And I saw my 7-year-old son approaching the gate. Unlike the other days, to that particular day, I saw him looking down with a heavy backpack on his back. And like as all mothers would do, I rushed to the gate and I grabbed the bag from his, the heavy bag from his back. And I asked him, hey, baby, is everything all right? And that day, my 7-year-old son, he looks up at me and he asks me, Mommy, are we terrorists? And it's so ironical that 14 years later, that I am before you this time, trying to bring to your notice and attention the maligning of Muslims, the discrimination of Muslims, not so much in the United States, but in my homeland, Sri Lanka. So that afternoon, when I lifted that heavy backpack from my son's back, that was a very defining moment in my life. That thrust me into the world and work of interfaith solidarity, community building. And it called me to take a deeper and a closer look at religion and race-based oppression, dominance, and violence. And I saw within the divisions in the faith communities, between the faith communities. On one side, there was bigotry and supremacy and exclusivity. And on the other hand, people like us coming together with utmost commitment to promote hope, loving kindness, compassion. And forgetting and remembering the words of Margaret Mead, who said that if there's any community that could make a difference. It'll be small groups of like us who come together to make change in the world. And today it is that hope and optimism that I have as we have come together to remember the victims of the Holocaust, the 6 million Jews, and the victims of genocides across the world. Actions committed in the intention of destroying either completely or partially a national, an ethnic, a religious or racial group through killing, causing bodily harm, inflicting atrocities, and or the prevention of birth in that particular group comes under the ambit of genocide. And I know fresh in our minds is the Cambodian genocide, the Armenian genocide, the Rwandan genocide, the Bosnian genocide. And the list goes on. And we can't deny the fact we are in a very dark era with certain leaders in our world who are bent on bringing not hope, but despair, not light, but darkness. And to this, I applaud Mike and the Center for Pluralism, because Mike, there's one word in his mouth: forgive and love and compassion. And I agree with you, Mike. Unless we forgive, there is no future. We can't do this work unless we are willing to forgive one another. And thank you, Mike, again for bringing us bringing us together today, not only to talk and reflect about the atrocities and the genocide on the human indignities happening around the world, but also calling us to a higher consciousness, to restore and repair the world despite everything that's happening around us. And that is restoring harmony in the world, knowing that restoring that harmony is our sacred duty. And as a community organizer and as an activist, I firmly believe that, yes, we can't be bystanders. We can't afford to be keyboard warriors. We can't be like beautiful potted plants. We can all do something. And for those of us who are doing something, we can do more. And we are all blessed with this capacity, the ability, and the gifts and talents to do something. And that is how I want to share with you that in 2018, together with my Jewish friend Marsha Novak, we founded the Interfaith Solidarity Network. And as Mike said, one of the largest interfaith organizations in the San Fernando Valley, for which the city of Los Angeles awarded us the Impact Makers Award. And today, in that backdrop, I come to you again with a level of despair, but with hope, because people of faith who are carrying on this work, we know that we can't get stuck in the familiar past, that we have to create a future. So I want to talk about an injustice that is happening in Sri Lanka, where we must answer the call to aid. The Muslims who are dead are forcibly cremated. And I'm a Sri Lankan American and work extensively in Sri Lanka in the field of reconciliation and coexistence. We train grassroots activists to organize for action. And I want to tell you briefly, Sri Lanka is a little island with 20 million people. 72% of the population are Buddhists. The population is 20 million. 14% are Tamils and Hindus, and only 10% are Muslims, and the rest are Christians. So Muslims are a small minority in Sri Lanka. To give you some context, the United States is 150 times bigger than Sri Lanka. So the cremation of the dead bodies of Muslims is a tragedy and is a travesty of justice. To this date, about 400 people have died from COVID in Sri Lanka, of which 150 Muslims have been cremated. And not all have been diagnosed even with COVID. So what happens is the Muslims are so afraid to even come out and admit that an elderly person is sick and needs hospitalization. Because if that person dies, They know the consequences and the ramifications of that death. So what the government does is they do a quick antigen test, sometimes a PCR test, and then if COVID is detected, they cremate the dead. Any request for a second opinion from the families are disregarded. There is such a haste to cremate the Muslim bodies. The religious rights of Muslims are horribly impacted by this immoral, unjust, and unlawful directive by the health ministry. Now, I want you to know the WHO guidelines are very clear that the burial of COVID diagnosed disease does not promote contamination of groundwater. In fact, 190 countries follow their directive, the directive of the WHO. World-renowned virologists and epidemiologists have advised the government that burials of COVID victims are harmless. And I want to briefly say, I hope I'm right in this. A lot of Muslims correct me if I'm wrong. When we Muslims die, we have three major rituals that we do. One is cleaning and bathing the dead body. Second is offering prayers. And third is making plans for a quick burial. And in
That is
Sri Lanka,
correct.
thank you, Mike. And in Sri Lanka, all what the Muslims are asking is just for a burial. And my Jewish brothers and sisters will recognize why this is. We have so much of commonalities in our religious rights for the dead. So without any scientific grounds, the government is mandating cremations, escalating the atrocities against the Muslims. In fact, just last month, a 2-month-old baby and a 20-day-old baby was cremated against the anguish and the cries of the parents. And in fact, the government of Sri Lanka had the audacity to reach out to the government of Maldives and ask whether they will accept the dead bodies of the Muslims. And they had negotiations with Maldives to ship the Sri Lankan Muslim dead to Maldives for burial. I mean, I live in California. Imagine if the government of the United States says, you're not entitled to be buried in California. You need to be buried in Mexico or Idaho. It is a serious travesty. And what fuels this travesty, my friends, is sad. I think Lord Buddha will be churning in his grave or wherever he's watching us. An extreme fraction of Buddhist clergy are demanding that the government not reverse this order and the cremations must continue. Sadly, majority of the Buddhists are quiet, 72%. And I'm reminded of the words of Simon Wiesenthal, a death camp survivor who searched for Holocaust perpetrators to bring them to justice. He said, for evil to flourish, it only requires good men to do nothing.
Thank
And
you.
what have the Muslims done? We have taken our grievances to the highest court in the land. We have demonstrated on the streets. We have challenged the government. We have fought at the burial sites. We have tied white ribbons, only for even those white ribbons to be removed by armed personnel in the nights. And attacking minority religious rights, I believe, is one of the lowest display of power I can think of. And as we know, today's theme is restoring harmony in the world is our sacred duty. Knowing that, embodying that. In order to build our capacities, we must understand the need to have power. And the Sri Lankan Muslims lack power. And in all of us as activists, as people who come to this arena to do work that is for justice and peace and compassion and collaboration in the world, we need to build power.
Thank you.
Building power is of course organizing people and organizing money. Understanding our self-interest and teaming up with like-minded people and taking personal responsibility is crucial. Fighting a government that advances a racist policy is hard. Hard on a community that is only 10% of the people.
Thank
We
you,
need the
Soraya.
voices of the international community. I have
Sure.
2 minutes, Mike.
Okay.
We need the voices of the international community. We in the US, I ask you, we can write to the Sri Lankan ambassador in DC. Please do that on behalf of the Sri Lankan Muslims. I filed a petition with the United States Commission on International Religious Freedom. We are seeking signatures from activists around the world so that we can forward this letter to our ambassador in Sri Lanka in DC. And I have personally taken over training of youth to really organize them to repair, reconcile, and rebuild our country. The Holocaust has happened. Genocides continue to happen, and we are not immune to the same risks today. According to Anti-Defamation League, anti-Semitic incidents in the United States increased by 57%. In 2018, the Interfaith Solidarity Network here in Los Angeles, we marched and honored the memory of the heinous attack of 11 lives taken at the Tree of Life in synagogue in Pittsburgh. But friends, we can't lose hope. So I reach out to you. Please sign a petition, send it to the ambassador in Washington, D.C. And Mike has a copy of that petition. I'll be more than happy to send you a copy. We can't lose hope. We must engage our youth and enhance the collective conscience of sufficient people who will stand up in solidarity. And let me finish with what Anne Frank said while she and her family were hiding in an attic in Amsterdam during the Nazi occupation. Before she was discovered and sent to the Auschwitz death camp, she wrote in her diary, "Despite everything, I believe that people are really good at heart." Thank you, Mike.
It is indeed. Thank you. Please send an email to mikegauss@gmail.com, mikegauss@gmail.com. Sam, you may want to send a note to everyone, and then I will send you the petition for you to sign. Sam, what are you doing here? Not Sam, I think it's always, I think he's trying to show the video. Let me, always, let's skip the video right now.
Okay.
Let's skip the video.
Okay.
Always, give me back the screen.
Yes.
Okay. Did I take the screen away?
Can you take that thing out the screen?
We can see you. Very fast. The need is already so great. While the government of Sri Lanka want to
Always, please stop this video. I need the screen back. Close the video, please. Always, please close the video. Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it. And if you get a chance, we'll play that 2 minutes video later at the time. Now, is Pandit Sharma, are you here? If you're here, we'll take you. If not, we'll go to Dr. Nyla Ali Khan. Pandit Sharma, are you here? Okay, we'll go to we'll skip, and he's texted me that he will join us. Now we'll go to the other program, the Siege in Kashmir, India. Dr. Nyla Ali Khan is a professor at Rose State College, Midwest, Oklahoma, and teaches at the Oklahoma City Community College. Dr. Khan was honored by the Journal Record as one of the 50 women making a difference in Oklahoma in 2019 and 2020. And she's author of the several books, and we are hoping and encouraging her to run for the Senate in Oklahoma, state of Oklahoma. Dr. Nyla Ali Khan, please talk about the siege in Kashmir. Please keep it to 12 minutes so all our speakers can get in time. Dr. Nyla Ali Khan, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Mike. It's a pleasure to be here. Over the years, several successive Congress governments of the Indian Union made attempts to highlight the purported illegitimacy of the autonomous status of Jammu and Kashmir. But they took no serious measures to revoke it. Surprisingly, even when the Vajpayee-led BJP assumed power in New Delhi, they avoided succumbing to the pressure put on them by their more fanatical cohorts to eradicate the special status enjoyed by the Muslim-dominated state of Jammu and Kashmir. On August 5th of 2019, the revocation of our autonomous status by the Modi-led BJP government was done without consultation with our state legislative assembly. And that made it clear that parliamentary democracy in India had been unable to protect a genuine democratic setup in Jammu and Kashmir. Time and again, provisions of the Constitution of India have been breached in Kashmir, and the ideals that it enshrines have been forgotten. In Kashmir, rights relating to life, liberty, and freedom of expression guaranteed by the Constitution and embodied in the fundamental covenants have been flouted. Prime Minister Modi cannot avoid his ethical and moral responsibilities toward the people of states in a federal country. The lives of the people of Kashmir cannot be torn asunder by paramilitary forces. After all, secularism means that all people have equal rights, irrespective of their faith and religious leanings, and that everybody should respect the other's feelings. In a federal setup, trust cannot be won by the display of national chauvinism and intervention of the military in democratic spaces. Militarized peacekeeping, which we are seeing in Kashmir these days, isn't much different from military interventions. India and Pakistan must be open to diplomacy and peaceful negotiations for the sake of regional stability. Let me assure everyone that the people of Kashmir will not falter from their ideals, even if they are left alone in this great battle for secularism and humanity. Recent statements and pronouncements made by the leader of the ruling party in India cast severe doubts on their democratic credentials. The incarceration of a large number of people in Kashmir, including elected politicians, for close to a year, relegated every stakeholder to the background. In effect, dissenting voices, even those of elected legislators and parliamentarians of opposition parties, were stifled. In doing so, Prime Minister Modi's government ignored the institutional checks and balances that should have prevented the over-centralization of power in Jammu and Kashmir. If the political evolution of a society is nipped in the bud by a belligerent military establishment, state policies always fall short of becoming coherent. The more the military establishment makes incursions into democratic spaces, the more shaky institutions of state remain, and the more fragmented a polity becomes. Once a populace begins to question the validity of the choices it exercises in the electoral process, because processes of electioneering and institutions of democratic governance lack transparency, the socio-political fabric is ripped to pieces. The more military official issues of politics, governance, and national interest, the more blurred the line between national interest and hawkish national security becomes. Instead of deterring the growth of democracy, the goal should be to empower the populace of Jammu and Kashmir sufficiently to induce satisfaction with their role within current geopolitical realities. And the empowerment should be such that the populace does not feel the need to succumb to ministrations of destructive political ideologies. In addition to addressing the political aspect of democracy, it is important to take cognizance of its economic aspect as well. Kashmir requires a strong and prosperous South Asian region. A strong and prosperous India is a guarantee to peace in our region, but a strong and prosperous Pakistan would strengthen that guarantee. So gloating over the instability in either of those countries serves no purpose and proves detrimental to peace in our region. The goal should be to find a practical solution to the deadlock that would enable preservation of peace in South Asia, particularly Jammu and Kashmir, while maintaining the honor of everyone concerned. The translation of a political and social vision into reality requires an efficacious administrative setup, free and fair elections, and vibrant political institutions which produce dynamic citizens while remaining aware of the exigencies of the present. A political movement that pays insufficient attention to the welfare of the populace, good governance, and rebuilding democratic institutions ends up leaving irreparable destruction in its wake. I would like to, before I end, Mike, I would like to talk briefly about a couple of draconian measures in Jammu and Kashmir, which must be revoked.
Yes.
Real quick, the Armed Forces Special Powers Act was enacted in 1990. It gave the Union government in New Delhi and its representative in the state, the governor, now the lieutenant governor, the authority to arbitrarily declare parts of Jammu and Kashmir disturbed areas, in which the military could be willfully deployed to quell legitimate political activity. This act entitles the military to shoot to kill, and this involves a potential infringement of the right to life. The introduction of other severe laws by the government of India has made it further non-obligatory to provide for any measure of accountability in the military and political proceedings in Jammu and Kashmir. And it is very important to revise such draconian measures. In conclusion, the process of nationalist self-imagining is likely to remain in a nebulous state as long as the destiny of Kashmir is etched by the pen of the calligrapher in New Delhi and determined by maneuvers in the murky den of subcontinental politics. It is necessary for our politicians to rise above their myopic aspirations to willy-nilly grab the throne and scepter. It is necessary for more self-reflectivity in our regional parties so they can recognize carefully what is at stake. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And I do hope there is a petition going on, and I hope the new administration will ask the Indian government to lift all the oppressive things going on in Kashmir. You know, it's good for people to be free and free to demonstrate, free to, in Kashmir also, a large gathering cannot be there to bury for the burials. These restrictions need to go. There are gross violations of human rights in India at this time in Kashmir. I do hope and pray that these things will be lifted and the people feel free again. When people are free, there is a lot of prosperity. They don't have to worry about the tensions and focus on developing the nation. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And if Dr. Pandit Sharma is there, please let me know. He was to join from India. If he is here, we will take him. If not, we will move to the next item. The next item is about the Uyghur update. It is again about 1.5 million people are incarcerated for no reason in China. And these are the Uyghur Muslims from the Xinjiang province. And Rushan Abbas has been a grand activist in this matter, and she has spoken all around the world. She's trying to help bring the world's attention to this particular issue and to shine light on the horrific human rights abuses happening in Xinjiang, that is in China. She's the founder of the Campaign for Uyghurs and a full-time activist who travels in the world giving talks and connecting with other groups that have suffered from Chinese repression. Rushan, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mike, for having me today, and hello, everyone. I'm going to speak here about the Uyghur people from East Turkestan, that's our homeland, and that's the symbolic and the historical name. Xinjiang, the name Xinjiang is given to us by the oppressors after the Chinese invaders occupied our homeland. I would like to begin my remarks by sharing a quote, which I am sure many of you know very well. Elie Wiesel, in his famous work, Night, said, quote, "I told him that I did not believe that they could burn people in our age, that humanity would never tolerate it," unquote. So many people find it hard to believe that at this moment, concentration camps have returned to the modern world. It's hard to imagine that yet again, slaves are picking cottons. Now the Uyghur slaves. All the while, we are not just bystanders, we are actively complicit through the TV programs we watch, software that we use, and of course, the products that we purchase. We are in the midst of a tumultuous period worldwide, facing the struggles brought on by the pandemic, and yet many of us have missed the root cause of this suffering, the devaluing of human life, most specifically by Beijing, a regime that very much resembles the horrible past. Uyghurs are facing genocide by the Chinese regime. As we speak, upwards of 3 million innocent people are detained in literal concentration camps with crematoria attached, all on the basis of their ethnic identity and their religion that they practice. Millions more are enslaved in factories across China, where they manufacture PPE for the virus that was concealed by the same oppressive regime. They are picking cotton and making clothes for many of the big brands on our backs in Western democratic countries. All the while, the world continues to raise the issues of dialogue with the murderous regime that is responsible for all of these. Crematoria are back. It seems it's too hard for some to hear, or too non-problematic for those who are blinded by a love of money. 13 tons of human hair seized by US Customs and Border Patrol several months ago. One shipment only, 13 tons. Whose lives to do these represent? What does that mean? 13 tons of human hair from the Uyghurs. According to companies like Nike that profit off of the slave labor of Uyghurs, or Volkswagen, who was also complicit in using Jewish slave labor during the Holocaust, and is repeating those horrific atrocities today. These lives mean nothing. Women are being forcibly sterilized and raped while we continue to court Chinese blood money in the name of diplomacy. China pushes the Belt and Road Initiative, a primary reason for the genocide, through such seemingly innocent means as the sister city relationships. Many defend the Chinese Communist Party from Western academic standpoint, while failing to acknowledge the many Uyghur scholars and the intellectuals who were the first to disappear to concentration camps. Amy Harmon wrote once in From Sand and Ash, quote, "How can you compromise with people who don't want you to exist? They want us to disappear. I cannot adapt to death," unquote. As an Uyghur, I related to this. For myself, the pages of history are being rewritten in new and horrifying ways. According to Disney, who out of all the locations in the world choose to film Mulan in the Uyghur homeland, where active genocide was occurring, and then to thank the authorities carrying out genocide in the credits of the film. These lives are nothing. Worse than ignored, they are seen and then dismissed. So when people say we aren't alone, it's really hard to believe it. The pariah that the Uyghurs have become as China pursues its expansionist, imperialist goals to colonize the Uyghur homeland is clear. I, a human rights activist, have the fear in my own nation. And I have already experienced enormous loss as a consequence for using my freedom of speech to take on China. We know the history of David and Goliath, and in most contexts, David is the hero. In today's modern age, where corporations like Apple lobby against the legislation to end Uyghur slavery, we are celebrating Goliath instead. My advocacy work here in the US caused China's abduction of my sister, a retired medical doctor, from her home in Urumqi, and sentenced her to 20 years in prison on the terrorism-related false charges. No trial, no information given to us on her whereabouts or conditions for more than 2 years now. not even the dignity of a response from the Chinese officials after they sentenced her. In 2019, Chinese state media accused me of using fake photo and lying about my sister before confirming her sentence just a few months before that, few weeks before that, they just confirmed. We learned on Christmas Day, and then on December 31st, Chinese Foreign Ministry just confirmed. Caught in lie after lie, they remain unrepentant. Yet here we are with the NBA courting Chinese business. Where are the voices from the rich and the famous and those celebrities who have always been so vocal on every social injustice? We allow Chinese money to fund our academic institutions, to run Hollywood, to buy the compliance of Disney. This must stop. China cannot be trusted, should not be trusted, and most importantly, should not continue to be offered platforms to spread their lies while the regime is committing active genocide. Chinese state actors still use our platforms of free speech in democratic countries while denying access to their own residents in China. Today, I ask, when you tell me I am not alone, can you mean it? Bad things don't happen because there are so many evil people in the world intent on genocide. They happen because of distraction, fear, and being overwhelmed in a way that causes people to shut down rather than take small steps towards to confront reality. But we must, and I hope you will join me in doing so. Thank you.
Rushan, thank you very much. You are not alone. We are all in this together. Until the humanity feels everybody's pain as our own pain, we cannot change the world. We have to change the world where every human being can live securely. I just want to assure you that you are not alone. And there is a word called Tikkun Olam. Our restoring harmony is our sacred duty. And that is basically what Tikkun Olam is. And I believe in Arabic, it is Maslaha al-Alam, which means correcting the world. Thank you very much. And hope the new administration will take stern actions against China to stop this. All it takes is for them to speak up, and that's all it takes. Nothing more than that. Thank you very much. Now if Pandit Sharma is not here yet, he is supposed to join from India. We will go to the Rohingya update. And Rohingya, it's another plight. There are about 2 million Rohingya people, mostly Muslims and some Hindus, that are expelled from Burma. And it is a very sad situation out there. And Dr. Wakar Deen is going to speak about it. He's a Rohingya American born in Mungdao, Arkana, Rakhine province in Burma, and received undergraduate education in Burma. He is currently a professor at the Pennsylvania State University, and he's the Director General of the Arkan Rohingya Union, the founding chairman of the Burmese Rohingya Association in North America. Dr. Rohingya has been instrumental in bringing Rohingya genocide to the International Court in Hague, and they have levied penalties against it. But again, as Rushan said, we have to speak up. We cannot be silent spectators. Ultimately, all of us are affected if one of us is affected. Dr. Wakaruddin, the floor is yours. Please take about 10 to 12 minutes and ask at the end what we need, what we can do. Dr. Wakar Uddin.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Mike Gauss, for organizing the 16th annual reflection on Holocaust and Genocide. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, Myanmar, Burma, known as also Myanmar, is a small country. But the magnitude of Rohingya crisis is such that it has reached a global scale. The internal and external displacement of Rohingya has exceeded way over 2.5 million. Bangladesh alone has over 1.2 million Rohingya refugees now, cramped in a few camps. This is the world's most crowded refugee camp, 40,000 people per square kilometer. Not to forget, there are also over 250,000 IDPs, internally displaced Rohingya, in camps in Rakhine State, Arakan, inside Myanmar, Burma also. This is a direct result of genocide. Yes, in Myanmar, they have destroyed pretty much everything which is Rohingya, starting from their identity, the community itself, and everything which is Rohingya. We are thankful to the international community for their tremendous support and sympathy for the Rohingya people. There have been many advocacies and actions at the international stage, including United Nations General Assembly, Security Council, Human Rights Councils, OIC Council of Foreign Ministers, US Congress, Canadian Parliament, British Parliament, European Union, and many, many specific countries. I can go on and on. This is what I mean by crisis at a global stage. While moving on with this through global advocacy to find a political solution for Rohingya people, we also have the legal approach now through the OIC and the leadership of Gambia, the country of Gambia. We are seeking justice for Rohingya people, that International Court of Justice, at the International Court of Justice, ICJ. Myanmar, Burma is a signatory to 1948 Genocide Convention. Yet it has clearly violated the Article 2, Article 3, and others of the Genocide Convention. The ICJ case on the Rohingya genocide is a unique court case. Rohingya people are not the nationals of Gambia, but Gambia is fighting for an ethnic minority group in Myanmar, which is thousands of miles away from Gambia. This is a result of the internationalization of the issue through the OIC. In this, first success was the UN fact-finding mission submitting the report to ICJ and ICJ accepting it. ICJ has the first ruling ordering Myanmar to comply with 4 provisional measures to protect Rohingya people. The court has given a clear path forward. In this current process, one thing we, the Arakan Rohingya Union, that is an organization formed by the OIC as the official representative organization of the Rohingya people, we are making sure that we provide regular reports to the OIC on the current situation on the ground in Rakhine State, Arakan in Myanmar, and whether there are violations on the ground by Myanmar or any positive development in line with ICJ's order on the provisional measures. To solve the crisis, there are a number of issues that are needed to be tackled, but there are 2 major issues, priorities. First one is protection of the remaining some 600,000 Rohingya inside Myanmar and reinstatement of their citizenship, full citizenship, what they had, with all basic rights that they lost. And of course, their security, because there are violence against Rohingya people time and again by the Myanmar military. Number 2, immediate repatriation of the Rohingya refugees from Bangladesh and other countries in the region. There are refugees in other countries that we don't talk much about except for Bangladesh, but there are in India, there are displaced people in Thailand, and there are refugees in India and Southeast Asian countries. the tripartite meeting between China, Bangladesh, and Myanmar just this week must be implemented aggressively. It can sure be materialized if China plays the role of an honest broker, and if Myanmar sticks to its commitment to repatriate the refugees to their original homes in Myanmar, village by village, without splitting the families. Myanmar government like to split the families in repatriation. Well, there have been a problem about that. Now, what you, the international community, can do.
Yes.
First, sustain the momentum. We have built a tremendous momentum at the international stage. We must sustain that. Reach out to your elected officials to further extend also support for the ICJ ruling, especially by the US government, US congressmen, US senators, and elected officials. We need to reach out to them. Just a couple of days ago, the US Secretary of State designate Tony Blinken has clearly said that he will oversee the interagency review of Rohingya genocide determination that was reviewed by the US government. It is imperative that we, all communities in US, including interfaith communities, will need to aggressively pursue this by reaching out to the US government agencies in the Biden administration. There is a petition now leading by the Washington-based International Campaign for Rohingya in Washington. You will see the link posted by Simon Billesness, the director, in the comment box in this Zoom meeting. There's a petition. Please sign the petition. We need to get aggressive.
I fully agree with you, and I urge everyone to sign the petition.
Yes, yes.
And I will send an email to everyone again, to my listing and my groups. And I would urge my fellow panelists here to do the same. Thank you, Dr. Wakar.
Yes, there are two, also additionally Washington, there are two resolutions at the Capitol Hill known as Rohingya Genocide Determination Act of 2020. That's House Resolution 8744 and Senate Resolution 4659. There are two resolutions. Okay, we must pursue these in a very timely manner without losing the momentum. We can reintroduce this, and now the administration, we have new elected officials. I think we can succeed. And then reaching out to local and international media. Media is very important. Okay, so the media, international, local media, we have to reach out for continuous coverage of this genocide. We cannot drop the ball. International community has to know. We have to continue to give them update on the issue, and sustain the humanitarian relief. Humanitarian relief is an important thing to keep the people alive.
Yes.
Survival. So there are dire situation in some locations, as you know. Last, not but the least, event like this, like you are a Center for Pluralism. This event like this is very important for public awareness. And I thank you on behalf of Rohingya people. I thank you very much for bringing this issue, genocide, Rohingya genocide issue in this event. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Wakar. Deen, I would urge everyone to take the action, pick up the phone and call the senators and congressmen. It will have its impact, and that is important for all of us to do that. I just want to add some comments. Kate, about the Holocaust. It is amazing the anti-Semitism or anti-anyone still exists. I was taken completely back when I sent this appeal to attend this event. I was taken back by a Christian friend of mine who says, why are you talking about the Holocaust? That is a gone event, and Christians are being persecuted in Nigeria, India, every place in the world. Why are you talking about Holocaust? I appeal to him to come and attend the program. It is just not Holocaust. We talk about everyone's misery, everyone's grief. We want to evoke empathy so we can learn about it. And it bothers me when people say other people's suffering is not suffering. That is a very dangerous statement to make. And I'm going to sit down with the gentleman and talk to him about it. We all need to be more human than what we have been. And now I will turn to Dr. Pandit Sharma, if he is here. He was going to talk about the flight of the Kashmiri Pundits who have been forced by the groups out there to go from Kashmir to live in New Delhi and other places as refugees for almost 20 or 30 years. It's a very painful event for them as they're enduring this as refugees moving from their own homeland. And Dr. Pandit Sharma, if he's not here, I will say a few more words, but we'll continue. Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt. May I emphasize a couple of points real quick?
Sure.
All right, so I want to emphasize that given the militarization and rapid fragmentation of Kashmiri society, which includes Muslims and Pundits, it is necessary for the government of India to evoke pluralism in the face of divisive politics, instead of pushing people to the wall by imposing a monolithic nationalism. In politics, the only viable way is forward, not a constant looking back, and policies and methods must be revisited, revised, and adjusted. The Kashmir issue, for better or worse, has been thrust on the stage of global politics, and its volatility has contributed to the destabilization of South Asia.
Thank you, Dr. Nyla Ali Khan. Appreciate it.
Joseph Corville wrote with foresight that, quote, whatever the future may have in store, the free world shares with India and Pakistan common responsibility for the fate of democracy, and it awaits with trepidation the solution of the Kashmir problem. Its own security may depend on such a settlement.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I just want to share a moment. We had invited several people from Kashmiri Pundits to come and speak about the plight of the Kashmiri Pundits. And it's amazing because you were speaking about the siege in Kashmir, they declined to speak. And Dr. Pandit Sharma finally agreed, and I hope he joins. Dr. Pandit Sharma, are you there? Please respond. If not, we move to the next item. And thank you, Nyla, for your comments.
I wish.
Thank you for your comments. I appreciate that. Again, no human should be expelled from their own homeland. Nobody should be made refugees. By the way, this year, I'm going to be aggressively working with the congressmen and senators. I'm going to knock on their doors, talk to them about these issues we are talking about. Holocaust, the anti-Semitism is still out there. Hindu phobia, Islamophobia, misogyny, all these issues, we need to take it up with the senators and congressmen and pass laws and legislations to curb these. Cremation in Sri Lanka, the expulsion of Kashmiri Pundits, the siege in Kashmir, the Uyghur plight and possible genocide, the difficulties of the Rohingya Muslims, even Bangladesh is trying to expel them to an island, remote island, which you heard all about this. So these are the issues we need to take up, and I need support from everyone. I will be out with the congressmen and the senators to take up these issues and work with other organizations who are doing these issues. We need to build a momentum to get this thing going. Now I invite Dr. Gregory Stanton to, he is the former research professor in genocide studies and prevention of the George Mason University, He is best known for his work in the area of genocide studies. He is the founder and president of Genocide Watch, the founder and director of the Cambodian Genocide Project, and the chair of the Alliance Against Genocide from 2007 to 2009. He was the president of the International Association of Genocide Scholars. He is going to speak about violations of religious freedom in India. I want to assure everyone, in the 15 years we have covered every issue. MaryAnn is going to be our keynote speaker after this, and she had sponsored the Native American genocide. We also talk about the transatlantic genocide of the African Americans. We have covered many events, and we will cover all the events in the coming years. Dr. Gregory Stanton, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. It's been a great honor to speak in your programs over several years, and I'm grateful to be invited to speak today. Today I will speak, as you have asked me to, about violations of religious freedom in India. And we've already touched upon some of those violations when we were speaking about the situations in Kashmir, where Muslims in particular in Kashmir, but in the past also religious freedom of Hindus has been violated by the Indian government and by terrorist groups and many other groups. In other words, Kashmir is a situation where the violations have gone in many directions. But what I would like to do today is specifically focus on the policies of the Modi government. Because since Narendra Modi has become Prime Minister of India, the government has been dominated by Hindu nationalists. The BJP party is a Hindu nationalist party. It is the political party of the RSS, which is an extremist Hindu nationalist party. It is a group, in fact, that included the assassin of Mohandas Gandhi. So you're talking here about a party that in many ways is a lot like the Nazi party that took over Germany. I'm not saying everyone in it is a Nazi. That is not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that the same kinds of ideologies are present. The extreme nationalism, the anti-Muslim attitudes, the in the case of a lot of other groups, you know, the view that only Hindus really are the true Indians. And that's not true, of course. India has long been a very diverse country. And what's really worrying about Narendra Modi's policies today is that there is a movement among the Hindu nationalists in the BJP to exclude Muslims in particular from the full rights that they deserve in India. In addition to that, there has been an increase in caste oppression in India under Narendra Modi. So let me just talk specifically a little about what's behind this. Modi has a long history of anti-Muslim activity. When he was the chief minister of Gujarat, there were anti-Muslim riots that killed at least 1,000 Muslims in Ahmedabad and other parts of Gujarat. He was never, no one was ever punished for those. He was elected Prime Minister of India in 2014 and was re-elected in 2019. But under his leadership, several very dangerous actions have occurred. First of all, the 1949 Constitution, Article 370, granted a certain kind of autonomy to Kashmir, because Kashmir was in an area in dispute between Pakistan and India. And so it was decided that Kashmiris would have a kind of an autonomy. Well, Prime Minister Modi revoked that autonomy in August of 2019, and Kashmir lost its freedom of self-government. In addition to that, India deployed 600,000 troops Kashmir. It banned public meetings. It shut down schools and colleges. It put 2 former chief ministers of Jammu and Kashmir under house arrest. It shut down the internet. Essentially, it declared martial law in Kashmir. And that has meant that troops have complete impunity. Gang rapes by police and soldiers, disappearances, torture, killings are common, and there's no punishment for them. Kashmiri children have been detained in government jails. We believe that at least 50,000 people have been killed in Kashmir between 1989 and the present. The other thing that is particularly worrying is that after his reelection in 2019, Modi's party passed the Citizenship Amendment Act. And that act offers accelerated citizenship for immigrants from countries such as Afghanistan, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and so forth, who are Hindus, Sikhs, Zoroastrians, Buddhists, Christians, but it specifically excludes Muslims. In other words, it is aimed at a particular religious group. And in particular, it is aimed at Muslims in Assam province of India, many of whom came to Assam during the genocide in Bangladesh in 1971. They were fleeing genocide. And now, and in fact, there were several million, there are still several million of these people who came to Assam. Well, the Citizenship Amendment Act sets up a system of a census to determine citizenship. And you have to have documents proving that you were an Indian citizen before 1971 if you're going to be continued as an Indian citizen. Otherwise, you're classified as a foreigner. And foreigners are subject to deportation. Not only that, they have built detention centers in Assam, and they're beginning to detain the Muslims, Bengali Muslims who are in Assam. This, in other words, is targeted religious oppression. We believe at Genocide Watch that this situation deserves international condemnation and attention. It has already been brought before the Commission on International Religious Freedom here in the United States. I've personally brought it there, and also others have brought it, and they've denounced this. And the other thing that it needs to be done is that the UN Human Rights Council needs to appoint a special rapporteur to investigate the anti-Muslim laws and the pogroms in Indian Kashmir and Assam. And in my opinion, the UN Security Council should monitor and regularly discuss this conflict and the situation of religious refugees in Assam and in other parts of India. That is what I have to say today. We are very troubled by what is happening in India. It is no wonder that President Trump, who I believe also had similar views to Prime Minister Modi, tried to stay in power and has, I hope, really been defeated here. But we're up against a resurgence of extreme nationalist views that are also religiously oppressive. Trump's anti-Muslim policies are very much like Modi's.
Yes, very much.
And so we're relieved that he was defeated. I have to say, we're a nonpartisan organization. We don't, belong to either political party.
Neither Center for Pluralism is we are a nonpartisan organization.
But we believe and continue to believe that Trump is a great danger to American democracy. And we believe that Prime Minister Modi is a danger to Indian democracy.
Thank you very much, Dr. Stanton. I appreciate it. And your website is Genocide Watch. People can just log in genocidewatch.org
Or
and
yeah,
.com. Sorry.
either one will get you there.
Sure. We appreciate that. And now Dr. Pundit Sharma has joined us. He is going to speak for about 10 minutes about what's going on with the Kashmiri Pundits. And then we will, MaryAnn will give the keynote speech. If we get time, I might ask all our speakers to give a 2-minute summary of what we can do as Americans towards this situation. Dr. Pundit Sharma, the floor is yours. You have 10 minutes to talk about the flight of the Kashmiri Pundits. Please go ahead. Oh, by the way, I didn't introduce him.
Thank you, Dr. Mike.
Let me introduce you. I forgot about that. Pandit Sharma gained early exposure and insights into the rich heritage and legacy of Vedic Hindu Shastras by his father, who has renowned scholar of his era and was considered an expert authority in Vedas. Dr. Pandit Sharma has been close to Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi, Prime Minister Indira Gandhi, and also Prime Minister Narasimha Rao. He worked closely with them in solving the problems India was facing at that time. Dr. Sharma, please go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Mike. I hope I'm audible with all of the friends.
You are.
Hello?
Yes, please speak close to the microphone.
Yeah. Okay. So, Dr. Mike, thanks once again. And I'm sorry that I have to join a little bit late because I have told you in advance that here the situation is really very critical with respect to farmers' agitation, and it is happening for the first time after 72 years of our freedom that they are holding a Republic parade separately than the usual parade which take place here in India. And around more than 2 million people are already around the different border of India, capital, Delhi, in the Tikri, in the Gazipur, and in Singhu, and in Palwal and Kundli and all that. So I have to be a little bit, keep certain things there, fine-tuning certain things. That's the reason I was a little bit late. Hope that you will not mind, and all my speakers will not mind my little bit joining late. Coming back to the situation in Kashmir, as I told you, Dr. Mike, that I got myself involved early in this, and when I was working with Prime Minister Mr. Narasimha Rao, and the Cabinet Secretary was Mr. Jafar Saifullah, and there was a big problem with Hazrat Bal, and certain terrorists had occupied. Then I have to visit there. Then after, when Atal Bihari Vajpayee was Prime Minister, so I visited there again, and at the invitation of all party conference, Sayyid Ali Sagalani was the chairman, and he invited me. And with before going, I had a very detailed talk with the Prime Minister Vajpayee and his team, including NSA, Mr. Vijay Mishra, and our various RAW and IB and other Home Ministry officers and all that. And then I have a very detailed discussion, not only with the Hurriyat people, but with the Kashmiri Pundits as well. And perhaps you know that Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru had Kashmiri origin. And I would like to recall that various Kashmiri Pundits have been very, very closely advising at that time the PMO, maybe Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru and maybe Indiraji. And during Indiraji time, Mr. Dhar was very, very powerful. Not only that, there are various other dignitaries and all that. But I would like to say that it was one of the biggest genocide in that time, in that situation when it happened in 1990, when this sort of exodus of Kashmiri Pundits took place, and it is one of the biggest black spot in our history and in our independent history and all that. There are various other things also, just like Babri Masjid demolition and the killing of the Sikhs in 1984. Similarly, the exodus of Kashmiri Pundits because of they were killed and looted and property was, and houses were burned and Kashmiri women were raped and all that. So, but I would like to tell you that at the time it was, Vishwanath Pratap Singh was the Prime Minister, and this was the Janata Dal government in India, and it was supported by the BJP from outside. And the governor was Mr. Jagmohan. And so just to blame one political party for that is totally misplaced and not correct. And but unfortunately, what I see that the BJP specifically talk too much about because of their Hindu Rashtra philosophy about the Kashmiri Pundits. But during 6 years of Atal Bihari Vajpayee regime, and during this last 6 years, more than 6 years of Mr. Prime Minister Modi, nothing has been done for the Kashmiri Pundits. Not a single thing has been done.
Very true. They just simply talk about it for political gains, but not done anything about the plight of the Kashmiri Pundits. Thank you for sharing that.
They talk so many things, and unfortunately, what they did in Kashmir is a very, very, very bad situation. And in last year, in 5th August, they have, abrogated this 370. And few people know that 370 came into existence because of Kashmiri Pundits, because of their entity, because they wanted to keep their identity very differently. And they have been very, very powerful position at the center as well as in the Kashmir. And Kashmir has been really a very, we call it heaven on earth, only because you would find before this exodus of Kashmiri Pundits, and that they were living in such a harmony. It was a very big thing. Kashmiri Pundits and Muslims were just living like brothers and all that. And you will notice that so many Kashmiri Pundits have their surname Mullah, and at the same time in the Muslims also. So, and even now, all the Kashmiris think, including the hardcore Muslims there, that Kashmir is incomplete without Kashmiri Pundits. But the situation is, has been politically too much hyped and just done nothing. And after this abrogation 370, you would be utterly shocked to know, perhaps you must be knowing, Dr. Mike, because you keep on touch with so many people, that thousands of Kashmiris are put in jail. And the youths, many thousands, and not only in Kashmir, in different parts of India.
Yes.
And the former chief ministers, 3 chief ministers were put in jail for months and months together. And that is the plight, and each and everything has been taken away from them. The talk is too much about the new development in Kashmir, as has been said by our Prime Minister, Mr. Modi, unfortunately, that Kashmir will be a new Kashmir and new development and this, blah, blah. But nothing has happened.
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Sharma.
No development has taken place in the last 1 year.
Thank you, Dr. Sharma. I appreciate your information on the Kashmiri Pundits. Thank you so very much. Friends, it is not easy. This program is not easy because we are talking about difficult issues. Please note that we have covered many incidences of genocide, ethnic cleansing, and massacres in the last 15 years that we have been doing this program. And we hope next year we will do a full day program where we can do more detail. And I appreciate all our speakers who maintain the 10 to 12 minutes time to do this summary program today. It is basically a summary program today, and I appreciate every speaker for maintaining the time. Now I will go to MaryAnn Thompson. She is our keynote speaker, and Let me introduce her. I'm reading through here. She is a renowned speaker, published author, philanthropist, and award-winning international sculptor. She is a co-founder and president of Dallas-based nonprofit Memnozine Foundation, or Memnozine Institute, is on a life mission to help communities worldwide to navigate globalization's pros and cons. She believes we are more interconnected and interdependent than ever before. So we have to be thinking systematically or won't survive. She's a pluralist and embraces the whole humanity without question. She has done some fantastic work with the Native American communities, from Hopi to Mayans. She has helped bridge these communities very well. I must add, whatever MaryAnn does, she does it wholeheartedly. She puts her heart, mind, and soul into it. MaryAnn, we have about 15 minutes for you. And after that, if the speakers stay, we can ask a 2-minute summary from each one of them, what we as humans can do. The floor is yours, MaryAnn.
Thank you so much, Mike. And first of all, I want to begin by saying that I am very humbled and deeply touched by everybody who spoke before me. When we talk about Holocaust and genocides, we're talking about personal stories as intimate as it gets. And we have to really understand that. As I've shared before in the past, when this event was held in Dallas, I was blessed, I'll use that term, for the opportunity to be in Rwanda. And in that place, I was walking on all these just bones and vertebrae. And I don't know, for those that haven't been in such a situation, it's hard to explain, but when you see so much of it at once, your brain just kind of shuts down and it becomes like they're rocks. Intellectually, you know it was a human, but it's just, you're so overwhelmed, it just becomes part of the terrain. And in this moment, as we were walking through this space, I stepped on something like, oh, what's that in my shoe? It was a vertebrae, a tiny baby's vertebrae. And just moving forward, until I got into this one building, and there were all these different items. There was a teddy bear, there were rosaries, and they were all completely soaked in blood, and nothing had begun to rot. It was very fresh still. And after that experience, I remember standing there, and as I said before, the air is thick with spirits. That's the only way I could describe that sense and place and being. But when I was standing there, the only thing I could think of was these people endured this. These people faced this. So what is the one thing I can do? I choose not to run away, choose not to close my eyes, choose to be in that space and make my prayer to all those spirits there and say, what can I do with my life to do my job of making sure this does not happen again? And, one of the understandings that comes with that is understanding what real evil is. And we were, no sooner had I really had that moment and stepped out, than suddenly our host, Charles Columba, so others were rushing, my husband's father, 2 of our friends and myself, and like, get in here. I'm like, what? And they shove us down underneath this desk and like, just stay down. Well, I kind of glance up and I see there's a man with a machete. He's walking around and he's wearing a skull on his hat. And I realize it's a real skull. It's a baby's skull. And he's proud and he's just moving this machete around and he's walking and he's surveying stuff. But one of my degrees was that I was originally pursuing as a student was in criminal abnormal psychology. Later changed it to organizational psychology. But it's not uncommon for people to revisit a space, either from healing or because, frankly, evil got off on what they had done. And in that particular day, as we watched this man walking around, holding this machete, seeing him essentially drunk on what he had done, it was an education, understanding what mindset allows for a genocide to happen. So from there, eventually we went to go see the museum, and the Rwanda Genocide Museum. And of course they had the famous quote when they said, never again did they not mean us. And what I found so amazing about that particular place is that they had, Rwanda didn't have a ton of money, but they had spent the money going all over, from Pol Pot to Germany to what happened to Native Americans here. They went all over the world. What are the commonalities? And they found there are 7 commonalities. A lot of times also things people say, oh, this came out of nowhere. No, nothing ever comes out of nowhere. And that is very important for all of us to really understand, because if we don't accept that, then we don't accept our responsibility in prevention. So understand, none of these things come out of nowhere. Even when you take a look at Rwanda, there was a Hutu, Tutsi, neither of those races even existed. The Belgians had made them up. And they said, okay, you know, Hutu versus Tutsi, Hutu versus Tutsi. Well, they had succeeded so much in the propaganda that people believed in it and bought into it, and there would be a smaller massacre, okay? You know, then people would ease, time would pass. Oh, a little bit bigger massacre, it would ease, time would pass. If we go over to Europe and we see what happened, oh, the Holocaust found, no, if you go back and, you know, I've been in Austria, where you go underneath the ground and you see old, beautiful Jewish temples that are still literally buried in the earth. And you can learn so much when you're in there. And you found out, why is basically a temple under the earth and more earth, and a temple and more earth, and then up here is modern day Austria? Oh, it's because way in the past, the Christians took a very literal interpretation and said that they can't basically charge for banking. So they knew that Jews could, so they'd say, come over here, have this land, we'll let you do all this. In exchange, you're the bankers for our community. They would do that, the city would grow up, and then the king said, okay, get rid of them. Well, this happened so much. And then it perpetuated, they need to justify this. So it perpetuated all the beginnings of this real strong anti-Semitism. All the things that we see that people, you know, like to point at, it came out of ancient medieval propaganda that still resonates today. So when we start looking at history, we realize nothing comes out of any, you know, out of the middle of nowhere. Now, in order to understand what allows us to either be unintentional contributors to these situations, or else people that are actual intentional ways to fight it, are these 7 things. One is called classification. Classification is defining it us versus them. That's why it's so easy for genocides to occur when there's is there a drought? Is there a pandemic? Is there a major financial crisis? If you look back during the burning times of ancient Europe, when 4 million women were killed, it was because there was a pandemic going on. Oh, let's blame the rich. You know, that was an easy way to scapegoat things. Look at something called symbolization. Now, symbolization, when we look at things like in the Holocaust, people wore an armband and were forced to do that. But in actuality, what is scarier in this modern day and age is people can choose something that already exists that differentiates. So, for example, I sit on the board of the Interfaith Institute of New York, and up there, unfortunately, we were witnesses to a number of videos because our organization was working with the New York Police Department, and you could see Sikhs were put on fire after 9/11 because of the turbans. People assumed turban meant Muslim and went after Sikhs. It was crazy. Here in Dallas, we had a Russian Orthodox church because it had one of those gold turnips on. People vandalized it. But the point is, they started trying to think, okay, they're literally thinking Aladdin from the cartoon. Okay, there were turbans and there were, you know, but whatever they could line up on is something different. So that's another one. Now, this is the next step, and this is one that we all have to be very, very aware of. Dehumanization. That is when you take whatever class you've chosen to target and you make them less than human. Usually it goes with the idea of being unclean. So, for example, when we talked about the witch burning times, they literally said the filth of the alien and the witch must be exterminated to preserve the purity of the human race, lest they degenerate into an abomination. The idea of purity, to purify. In terms of propaganda in Rwanda, was kill the cockroaches. In terms of, in the USA, the only good Indian is a dead Indian. These are things that were said. Now, most recently, this is where USA, people need to pay attention. This is where Trump said infestation.
Yes.
Now, I know this is not supposed to be political, but I'm just giving you the objective facts. When we start referring to human beings as cockroaches, as an infestation, or anything like that, we get into a lot of dangerous area. So we move down as organization. Society reorganizes itself to accommodate these new belief systems. And I'm going to skip over that return there because this is important. The next one is polarization. Moderates are eliminated. USA people need to pay close attention to that. Moderates were constantly attacked from all sides. Preparation. Victims are separated. The USA needs to pay attention to this because that is what we still have on the border. That is number 6. The step after that, 7, is extermination. So why did we not get into mass exterminations here? I would argue that it's because of number 4, organization. And that's where we have a lot of power. As long as we, the people, will speak up and organize. I went down to McAllen, stood in front of a bus with a number of other people. We didn't have to get violent. And we stood there until we got people to be able to photograph and prove there were children in those cages. People all over, my friend Robbie Rogbier up in New York, he worked with systems to get whole communities to deal with ICE. When ICE would show up, people would immediately text and someone be there to witness. There are ways to not break the law that allow people to say, I see it, I'm not ignoring it, I'm not allowing you to reorganize my perception of society in such a way as to believe that this person who is different than I am is less than human. But unless we each take on that responsibility, we leave ourselves very open for these kinds of things. Now, I've heard a number of people talk today about the spread of fascism. The spread of fascism is rising in the world. And again, these different 7 steps are things to pay attention to.
Indeed.
Is there a pandemic? Yes, all over the world, there's a pandemic. Are there financial strife? Yes, because of the pandemic, there's financial strife. This is the perfect 2-punch combination for fascism to rise because it's so much easier to choose someone other than yourself to blame as opposed to say, okay, what can we do to repair this? How do we need to do this or that? It's a lot easier to just do blame. And we on the progressive side of things have to take our responsibility as well. I've heard people refer to other human beings as cockroaches, infestation. When I saw cockroaches, a chill went down my spine because I remembered Rwanda. When we start looking at this thing, we have to start looking at ourselves and say, how am I complicit? Because I promise you, my husband is related to Anne Frank, and as he pointed out, he said, she didn't die in a gas chamber. She died because she was packed in like sardines. But that is what's happening down there. There's something called gentle genocide that we don't use a lot in the United States, but the reason why it's called that is because when Native Americans are moved to a reservation, we made a deal. Okay, we're shoving you on land that you can't produce food on forever after we provide food. We didn't think about the terminology of, okay, we're only going to eventually start giving you junk food and we're going to intentionally give you diabetes and slowly that's all you're going to have. And, so what that's called gentle genocide because no one's shooting a gun, no one's forcing someone to gas you, but all the elements are intentionally cultivated to basically ensure a people will slowly get smaller in population. You could argue that term could be applied to our food deserts, where you have a lot of African Americans and Hispanic Americans who also are, you drive an hour and a half in and there's no place to get, good produce or food. So again, then you have a disease like COVID and it goes after people with diabetes. So you see these kinds of equations and we don't have to be comfortable with it because we're not the ones doing it. We're not intentional. We're not saying genocide, but we're allowing these factors to happen. And similarly, when we packed in people like sardines at the border, and we denied vaccines and we confiscated medicines and we put women into solitary if they dared bleed on themselves when it was that time of the month, and we only allow them to have 1 or 2 tampons so that they were destined to mess up on that. These kinds of things allow for contamination, allow for the same situations that we saw with Anne Frank. So if people die because of this compact, thing, yes, it's more akin in a sense to gentle genocide, but it is a form of genocide. And so the United States has to look at ourselves and say, are we, I heard a lot of people today talk about, we need the United States to get on board. The United States will not have the moral and ethical authority to intervene in a way the world would take seriously unless we talk about our own concentration camps.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And we also have to be aware, those of you who aren't from the state of Texas may not know, that in the state of Texas, it is completely legal to have people do slave labor so long as they're considered criminals. So I invite you, you can go to Google. I've gone to Google and you'll see a young Black man put on a little wooden stuff, and there's a man who's auctioning, and he literally will say, this young buck can get you this many hours of work, blah, blah, blah. And in the audience, the people that are actually doing this and betting on them, they represent corporations. So we've heard today about people, in China doing this kind of thing. It's not just in China. What needs to happen is all these communities have to go, what corporations are doing the same style of business, immoral, unethical business in China, in India, and in the United States? Because we find often that you either have the same corporations or you have same individuals sitting on multiple corporations boards. But for those of us that are fighting and are really looking at an eagle's eye, we have to look at an eagle's eye in the patterns, the 7 steps toward genocide. We also look in our history, recognizing that a lot of people are brilliant and informed. People are talking about why is fascism rising? I mean, there are a lot of different reasons for it, but there's also an individual that those of us fighting genocide need to be aware of, and that's Steve Bannon. He went all over the world and tried very hard to actually establish a university in Italy. He got the leader of North Korea and Budapest to all come together and help fund this initiative. And thank God it ended up being nixed because he had taken over a monastery, and a small Catholic monk noticed it, thought it was weird, reported it, and thank goodness it got disbanded. But what he was attempting to teach, and he literally, and none of this he hid, this is not even hidden. He was literally trying to create a nationalist training ground for young minds to rise up and become the leaders in multiple countries. So if you start going, why is this here and there and there and there? And the funny thing is that if he's trying to encourage people in one country to feel nationalists here, he's encouraging them they're the best. The other country, he's doing the same thing. This is ripe. This is a intentionally cultivated, very intelligently, sociologically encouraged evil being risen. So
Thank you,
the reason
MaryAnn.
I only mention him is I think many of us have to be aware of the individuals. We talk about what happened, in terms of the tiki torches. It didn't come out of nowhere. What happened was they were brilliant, and we're not intelligent if we don't admit to their knowledge and their strategy. They are brilliant and they strategized very well. But what they did is they went and they found who make up lonely, frustrated, young men who do not have a sense of identity. They found gamers, and they actually went all the way back to when these young men were only about 10 years old. They found a very cute cartoon icon. It looks like a frog. Pepe was the name of the frog that all these kids liked. They took over the meme and they encouraged the meme, made it fun, made it cool, made it funky. And then over the years, started slipping in, a little anti-Semitism, slipping in a bit of anti-brown people. And so by the time all these young men are no longer 10, but they were teenagers and they're 18, whatever, often very much the loner, then they sent something, you know what, it would be really cool if we could all get together. Let's all meet sometime. And that was the Tiki Torch March. So
MaryAnn, thank
the
you.
point I'm making is that we look at these things, we have to see patterns, we have to recognize that nothing comes out of nowhere, and know that our own role in these things is that when each of us takes on the responsibility to speak up, because that is how powerful you are.
Agree. You want to give a 1-minute message at the end?
My message to everybody is never be quiet. Never, always speak up. And again, for all of you that are fighting very hard on these issues, please continue to do so. Please also be aware that there are 3 prisons. 2 were built with $43 million each. 1 was built with $75 million. And they are built here in Texas at the same time, and hopefully it didn't get passed, but Trump was trying to pass laws that would have turned anyone who had legally applied to become a legal immigrant, they would be labeled as criminals, which would allow them to basically become permanently a slave class. Yeah. And we need to be aware that there are a number of companies that were supportive of this. So be aware of our own actions in our country. hold ourselves accountable. And only by that will we actually have the moral high ground to hold anybody else accountable.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, MaryAnn. Now I'm going to ask our speakers to share 1 or 2 minutes summary of what we as common people can do about this. I will ask Kate English to say a few words. Kate.
Thank you again, Mike, and thank you to all of the other speakers. This has been a rich and really fruitful conversation. I know that I'll take a lot of this information and share it with our teachers and our networks. I think there are a couple of important things that I would ask. One is to please look into, if you're in the United States, whether or not your state is one of the 16 that requires Holocaust education. If not, please look into why or what exists. It's not a consistent message across all 50 states. It needs to be. This also could be something addressed through more support of social studies curriculum, bringing it up to the same standard of importance as reading, writing, math, and science. And right now, there's so much disagreement about what and how to teach across the 50 states that it makes it quite difficult. And lastly, I'll just make a pitch and say, please support our work at www.eihr.org. We are reaching out to teachers across the globe and creating community, and we would appreciate your support. Thank you.
eihr.com.
.org.
Please, it will be posted on the chat. Thank you very much, Kate.
Very welcome.
Now I ask Soraya, Deen, to take 1 minute or 1.5 minutes to speak about what we can do about the Sri Lankans' forced cremation. Soraya?
Thank you, Mike. I think this is a powerful segment where you are giving us an opportunity for the ask. I believe we can all do something. As MaryAnn said, doing nothing is not an option. We can all do something. Dr. King said, if you can't crawl, walk. If you can't walk, run. If you can't run, do something. Just don't be static. So my humble request is, I don't know how to get this petition through to you. Mike, I believe everybody has your email, Mike.
Yes.
Will you please write to Mike and please sign the petition and send it to the, just email it or mail it to the Sri Lankan ambassador in DC. That will be huge, because we Muslims in Sri Lanka feel we have exhausted. We have hit a huge wall, and unless the international community holds us with love and care at this time, we might lose this battle. And knowing what's happening in China, knowing what's happening in India, Sri Lanka is going to be the next country that's going to be persecuting its minorities, and we must hold the government accountable and call out its racist policies. Overt. This is not a subtle policy. This is overt. And well fueled and infused by the Buddhist clergy, a fraction of it. And it is very sad and concerning. So again, what I say is, please sign the petition and mail it to the ambassador. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Soraya.
Thank you, everybody.
I now will ask Dr. Pundit Sharma to share 1 minute or 2 minutes. What can be done about the Kashmiri Pundits? Dr. Sharma?
Hello, Dr. Mike.
Yes, sir.
I'm audible?
Yes, you are. We can hear you.
I would like to say something first regarding the very plight situation of farmers here in India, because they are from Kashmir also as well. They are from each and every part of India, Kerala and Maharashtra and Karnataka and Madhya Pradesh and Rajasthan, UP, Haryana, Bihar and all that. And their number is more than 620 million.
Yeah, 20 million. Okay.
No, 620 million is the total number.
Okay.
And you would be shocked to know that around 400,000 have already committed suicide in the last 6 years during this Modi regime. And because of the wrong policies adopted by this government, even the previous government was also not so good for the farmers. And unfortunately, the situation which has already become very volatile here, and the border of Delhi, our national capital. You know, anything can happen on any day because around 300,000 tractors are already there and they are likely to make a parade. And what we noticed only yesterday, day before yesterday, that certain people have planted 60 people on the near the Singhu border to kill this topmost four farmer leaders from Punjab. And he was caught and he was handed over to the police. And he is told that what is the planning over there. So anything can happen any moment because if the around 2 million people start, moving around Delhi on the tractor and all that, it will be very, very problematic to handle if anything happens at any point of time. So I would like to request each and every of my fellow people over here and everywhere that they do whatever they can do for stopping this possible sort of mass killing of the farmers and on the hands of the wrong policies. Unfortunately, the media over here is totally under control, and the courts have already left their independence. All the constitutional bodies have already become, subservient to the rule, and they are not following the constitutional obligation. So that's the reason I'm requesting, because this is what is happening right now. Whatever has happened with respect to Kashmiri Pundits is most unfortunate, and the present government must do, should not do only this good talk, they must do something solid for the rehabilitation of the Kashmiri Pundits and to ensure their safe return, provide them the safe home, and whatever they can do for them is, but this thing which has already become very volatile here around our national capital must be taken into account by each and everyone and must be done so
Thank
that if anything can happen, so we may not repent here in later on that whatever we could have done, we have not done for that time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sharma. And I think we should certainly work on rehabilitating the Kashmiri Pundits back in their homes. Now I ask Dr. Nyla Ali Khan to give a 1-minute summary of what can be done about the Kashmir siege. Dr. Khan.
Mike, I was raised in Kashmir in the 1970s and the 1980s, when Kashmiri society was composite and secular. And the Muslims of Kashmir lived in harmony with Pundits, Sikhs, and Christians. So that is the culture that I come from. That is my rich heritage, of which I'm very proud. While the exodus of the Kashmiri Pundit community will always remain an ugly blot on the history and politics of Kashmir, it is important to recognize the socioeconomic as well as political marginalization of Kashmiri Muslims as well. I, for one, and other people like me in Kashmir, seek the revival of our composite culture, which would include not just Kashmiri Muslims, but Kashmiri Pundits, Sikhs, Christians, and Buddhists as well. That's the kind of society we would like to see revived.
And what can we do about it?
What we can do about it, the international community can call for more accountability and more transparency in India.
Exactly.
Prime Minister Modi's government has successfully demonized minorities, not just Muslims, but as Gregory pointed out, lower caste Hindus as well have been demonized and criminalized in India, because of which Prime Minister Modi's government has gotten away with the draconian measures they have implemented in several parts of the country. They can be held accountable for the criminalization of Muslims as well as Dalits.
And Christians.
And Christians also, absolutely. At the end of the day, India is a federal democratic country, and in a diverse country, it is not only for the majority community to approve laws, but the minority community should also feel that constitutional amendments and laws will bring peace, security, and honor to all of them. And I would, real quick, Mike, I would like to touch on the issue of incarcerated Kashmiri boys and men, several of whom are being held in jails and prisons in mainland India. So away from the valley, away from their families. And several families of these incarcerated young men and boys do not have the wherewithal to travel to those parts of the country where their sons are being held in prisons and jails. So those people are psychologically mauled, physically, of course, devastated, mauled as well, politically disempowered. We need to call for the revival of a society which recognizes the rights of the marginalized. And that would include the rehabilitation of the Kashmiri Pundit community.
Indeed.
Without which Kashmiri society is deprived of a rich heritage, is denuded.
Thank you so much. Legacy. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Restoring harmony in the world is our sacred duty, as the Hebrew word says, tikkun olam. I would ask now Rushan Abbas to share in a minute summary of what we can do about the Uyghur in China. Rushan? Rushan Abbas? We move to Dr. Gregory. Dr. Gregory Stanton, please share 2-minute summary. Thank you.
What we've heard today is how widespread the problem of genocide and of religious persecution is. And in particular, we focused on India, we focused on Sri Lanka, and we also know, of course, that the Rohingya from Myanmar have been victims of this. But it is not just, of course, in Asia. It is also in many other parts of the world. What we have here is a fundamental human problem, the problem of ethnocentrism, of religious exclusion, of a opposition to pluralism. And what we in the Alliance Against Genocide are working for is a world mass movement to try to prevent genocide from taking as many lives in this century as it did in the 20th century. In the 20th century, about 170 million people were killed by genocides. That's more than all the wars combined. And genocide is often very difficult to combat within a nation state. In fact, it's fostered by the nation state system. What we need is to build international institutions that can stop it, and we need to build an international mass movement that will put pressure on governments to stop it. Now, the best way to stop it, of course, is from inside a country. And that is where we have really focused on trying to get member organizations in the Alliance Against Genocide around the world. We now have 80 member organizations in 31 countries. What I've heard today are some very effective speakers against genocide, and I would welcome your interest in becoming part of the Alliance Against Genocide. We don't have dues, we don't try to tell you what to do, but our organization are alliance does try to work for this common purpose of preventing genocide. I want to thank Mike, especially today, for organizing this meeting. I want to thank some of the people who've been commenting. I know some of you who, for instance, Simon Villanes, who's been putting up some of the petitions that I hope we will sign. And I know that there are many other things that we can do together to oppose this terrible human tragedy that is genocide.
Indeed.
And overcome it.
What is the website they can join the alliance?
Well, there are two. One is at genocidewatch.com, of course, where we have our own Genocide Watch website, but we also have an alliance website, which is simply againstgenocide.org.
Againstgenocide.org.
Right.
Got it. And if you all send me an email, mikegauss@gmail.com, I will send the links to all these and you will have all the information. Friends, thank you very much. I'm going to conclude the program in a few minutes. The restoring harmony in the world is our sacred duty. If I will not have peace, I will not be secure if people around me are not in peace and not secure. If I harass others can harass me. So we have to build a cohesive world where every human can live with dignity and security, whatever their race, ethnicity, religion is, they need to feel secure. That is the kind of world we aspire. And as we are doing forward, and I'm going to be very involved with the senators and the congressmen to take all these issues that you have talked about and join the alliance Dr. Gregory Stanton mentioned, and work on doing our share of work. It is our sacred duty to do that. And the Center for Pluralism is all about, our mission is to build a cohesive America where all of us can live securely. We have programs every Sunday, 12 to 1:30 usually, about pluralism in politics, pluralism in culture, pluralism in religion, pluralism in family, and that's what we are. Our website is centerforpluralism.com. If you want to see our future events, centerforpluralism.com, just click on the tab workshop and you will get to see this. And this conversation we have had today will be uploaded on the YouTube. All you have to go is go to the YouTube and type Center for Pluralism and you get our channel, and you can share the links. Thank you very much for everyone for joining. And it is a very sad thing that is happening in the world, but we have to do our work. We just cannot talk. We have to do our work and be activists to bring about peace and harmony in the world. Thank you very much, and I'll have a good day. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Excellent. Absolutely excellent.
Thank you, Andrew. I appreciate that.
Very difficult to watch and hear, I will tell you.
I know it is very difficult.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Mike. And thank you for inviting me last year and for inviting me today.
And thank you for sharing your Holocaust personal story last year. I appreciate you.
Thank you for everything, Mike.
Thank you, MaryAnn. Thank you for sponsoring this event in the past 2 times. Thank you for highlighting the genocide of Native Americans as well as the transatlantic African Americans. I appreciate that. And you are right in the front of everybody there. I'm going to stay. I'm going to be the last person to leave. So everybody is welcome to say whatever they want to say.
Well, I am really grateful because I don't think most of the folks on this call even knew about what's happening in Sri Lanka. So in some measure, I was able to share this, and I really, really am grateful for that opportunity.
And we will send your petition to all of the interfaith groups for signatures.
Okay, thank you, Mike.
And what I'd like to say something. It was very enlightening. I had no idea of some of this stuff, a lot of it. And I'm going to do further research. I was taking notes and everything. And if anyone has any comments, just unmute yourself at this point. if you want to ask a question or if you just want to have a quick comment.
Sam is our director at the Center for Pluralism. Go ahead, Andra.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to respond to Soraya about the Sri Lanka. Just to let you know that Rizwan Jaka of the Adams Center called a meeting together with the representatives of the United States Office of International Religious Freedom the other night, and I was part of that phone call. What was interesting is people shared all of the letters that were written to the government of Sri Lanka, very important people, you know, about the religious freedom and all of that, and nobody's paying attention to it. So it's not where it's where we can appeal to people because of their ethics and their respect for religion. One of the things that was brought up was the idea of, which actually I think you mentioned, is that people are making products that are being exported. And so sometimes these governments don't listen to the ethics, but they listen to the financial implications.
Exactly.
And that is, that's one of the things that actually kickstarted the civil rights movement here, you know, with Rosa Parks and people not riding the buses because that caused an economic hardship. So the ethics of civil rights wasn't being listened to for many years. So we found out that the United States is giving a lot of money, I don't know how much money, to the government of Sri Lanka to be able to help them with the COVID-19 situation, and they're not using the money appropriately. So the idea is to move from the ethics of the religious freedom component to the idea that, you know, what are we supporting by giving Sri Lanka money? What are they doing with that funds? And to be able to encourage them to step back, to think that maybe the United States will not be giving them any more money until they correct their human rights issue, because it's a human rights issue. It's not a religious issue. One person also, Soraya, said that a 94-year-old woman who was a Muslim woman was taken away and, you know, to the horror of her family. And she did not even have COVID-19. There was no reason for that. And they wouldn't test her. So this is and I'm sure there are hundreds, if not thousands of examples of this kind of thing, which shows that it's an out and out prejudice against a religion. And so I really think with actually all Sri Lanka, whether it's Myanmar, whether it's, you know, in China, all of these situations, these people, as MaryAnn said, there's a kind of an evil or an ignorance. So they're not going to respond to people writing notes. And I hate to say it, they're not going to respond to petitions. You know, it has to be something stronger than that. We have to go to the government officials and we have to talk about our donations to these governments. We as the populace, we as people, individual citizens can speak up by boycotting these products, by boycotting Nike, by and saying why we're doing that. Because, and the other thing too, Mike, is, and then I'll stop, is that so often we
You are
hear,
right on.
yeah, so often we hear of all these terrible things that are happening, and all of us go away today. You know, it just tears my heart apart. It's the biggest thing that we need to follow is, and we don't put as much time into this, Mike, is what can we do about it? That's the problem. We're sort of, everybody tells us these things, which are horrible, and we're helpless. So what can the average person do to be able to make a difference?
I can answer that question if you like.
Yeah.
I've just put into the chat a link to the No Business with Genocide Action Center, where there are boycott petitions there focused on Zara for its connection with forced labor in China. But the whole point about No Business with Genocide, Andra, is to do precisely what you're asking for. It's to put pressure on companies to avoid complicity in genocide and mass atrocities around the world, and more importantly, to put pressure on governments, economic pressure.
That is a good point.
And so if you go to just click on the link. Actually, I didn't send that to everyone. Here we go. Let me just send that to everyone. Okay. Okay, everyone has the link there. Right there is a link in the chat to the No Business with Genocide Action Center. There are a couple of petitions on there. Just sign the petitions. You'll get onto our email list. And every week you'll get an email about actions that you can take to put pressure on companies to end genocide around the world. And so that's something you can do right now. And also, more importantly, it gets you into our 10,000 community of activists around the world who are actually doing this work right now, every minute of the day.
Thank you, Simon. Appreciate it. That is a very key point. If you can tie the economic aid with the human rights, we can achieve a lot more. I think the USERF, that is United States Commission on International Religious Freedom, had proposed this to the State Department. They did not take it up. Now I hope the Biden administration will take it and tie the economic aid to human rights. Thank you very much.
Specifically, what we do is we do two things. We do put pressure on governments like the US government to put effective governmental sanctions on countries that are committing genocide, but also we apply our own citizen sanctions in our role as consumers, as shareholders in these companies. We can put our own direct pressure on companies to end their support for genocidal regimes. And again, the link right now is in the chat. I sent that to everybody. Click on that link. That's the No Business with Genocide Action Center. Click on the petitions, take action today. There's 2 petitions right there. And then you'll get on our list and you'll receive information on more actions that you can take.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. I will stay on until everybody says goodbye. So I'm here.
Mike, there's I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing this properly. Zion Hassan had some comments. Are you still there?
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. My name is Sajjad Hassan, and I'm so sorry I can't turn the camera on. Some problems with the camera, but I'm really glad that I joined this call and heard everyone here. Really valuable. Just wanted very quickly to mention I work in India, on India, and hearing particularly Dr. Gregory Stanton talk about specific actions that can be taken. Now when we're talking of India, I mean, the kind of pressures you're talking about, pressure on business, India, a very large market, also a large political force, also in a sense, the West's biggest hope, also in its sort of struggles against China, etc., etc. So there's a lot of geopolitics as well involved. And what we keep struggling with is what are the best ways to get people internationally to put pressure on India, and there are no clear answers. So I'll be really interested in future conversations.
Thank you very much. And you can log into centerforpluralism.com. We will have the current information on there. And we will also put some of these links on the homepage of centerforpluralism.com. Thank you, Zain. And anybody else who wants to share a few comments?
So
Our official program was over at 2 o'clock, but we are just going extra time.
So Andrea, on another note, because of Trump's lackadaisical international approach and relationship with countries, Sri Lanka has now turned to China in a big way. Most our ports have been bought by China. We are doing business with China. We refuse to sign the MCC, the one of the most vital agreements that America was pursuing us. So America has, in a sense, lost some of its clout, moral authority over Sri Lanka. But yet what you said resonates well, and that is the kind of like the only path to really squeeze them from their neck. So what did you all decide? And I would like to be in that meeting next time because it's very important to
Soraya, there was no decisions that were there. Thank you. There were no decisions that were made. It was a very small group of people.
I see.
It was a case of sharing ideas. And we sort of moved, and actually some of the representatives of the Office of International Religious Freedom, actually you could see where they were sort of, how can I say, awakened a little bit to the idea that this only an economic kind of sanction is something that they need to think about. I mean, there also is the annual, and I'm sure this is happening in Sri Lanka, Myanmar, and all these places, even India, where there's an annual report by the International Religious Freedom Office of this every year, where they put a list of countries that are
Particular interest.
Particular concern.
Yeah, and so nobody wants their names there. But what I am finding, and this to me is what is scary, and I did put it into the chat, I don't know if anybody saw it, but you've got governments. I understand the governments are guilty, but you've got citizens of the country. And I think you even mentioned 70% of the citizens are not speaking up. So I see here with the people, then I work with a lot of people from India, and they love Modi. They love him. They say he is the best thing that has happened to India in a long, long time. And they think that a lot of the anger about Modi is based upon just the media, and you can't listen to the media. So they themselves do not have the right kind of information, to be honest with you, to really speak up. And this is a human problem, Mike, you know,
Yes.
is that everybody, when we talk about, I forgot, ethnocentrism was a new word that I heard. Everybody wants their religion to be the religion in the country. And so that then becomes the problem. This Hindustan, you know, that I hear about, people are proud. They're proud of that. Like, yes, you know, Hindus have been prejudiced against them for so long. And finally, we have somebody that's going to stand up for Hindus. And so they're not paying attention to these other things that are happening. And they think it's just, it's fake. That's the reason why when MaryAnn talks about observation and witnessing, you know, when you get people who have personal stories, this is not the media, you know, so I think more of the personal stories have got to be shared, and the pictures, rather than just, you know, we can go through the normal structure of petitions and lobbying and all of that. But I think personal stories are going to touch the hearts of people and make it more real for them.
Absolutely.
And that's what we have to do as far as the citizens of India, the citizens of Myanmar, the citizens of, you know, all of these places. And it's scary when the citizens approve and think it's okay.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the same thing in the United States. We have 74 million people think Trump was the greatest thing that happened to America. So we have to do personal stories, have personal contacts, and put the information in front of different people. Thank you, Andra, for sharing those thoughts. Anybody else, if want to share? If not, we can, I will be the last person to say goodbye.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you so much, Mike.
Yes.
Very important work you're doing.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mike. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Simon, for that link. I noted it. And Owais, you did all the technology today.
And Oves helped also, and Sam is behind this. So thank you all for doing
Yes,
this.
Sam.
Really very important work that you're doing. Thank you so, so much.
Thank you. And Andrea, are you based in DC?
Yes, I'm definitely in DC. Well, I'm not in DC. I'm in Northern Virginia, but that's right outside of DC.
And she's my favorite sister.
Oh, good. Good.
I work with Mike all the time. Absolutely. And I work with Oves. Oves and I and Walter Ruby have started actually a new organization called the International Interfaith Service Initiative, with the idea that maybe all working together to help each other and help those in need will pull religions together away from all of their dissension and their, you know, pulling together with their differences. So we're hoping to make a difference with people, different free religions coming together to follow what all of their religions believe in, is helping their fellow man and woman.
Exactly.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Mike. Thank you all.
Thank you,
Thank you
Soraya.
all.
God bless.
Everybody, thank you, Mike. for
Thanks.
hanging there.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Simon.
Okay, bye.
And
Bye, everybody.
thank you, Augustus, Kalarapimo, and other friends. Have a good day. Thanks, Sam. And thanks always. Okay, we'll end the program. Thank you.